So it is currently what I think going into week number 9 of the NFL season, and I figure it's essentially halfway through the season for the Buffalo Bills here in 2022. And the last couple of years, I've kind of given myself like rambly videos or whatever before the season, at the end of the season, and I think during the season as well at some point, mainly for myself to look back on, just to kind of see where I was at a given time. I love watching the Bills play, but just to throw my thoughts out there as an extrovert, love to hear myself talk. But yeah, so as of now, the Bills are currently sitting at 6-1 through 8 weeks of the NFL season. They've already had their bye week. They had that not this last week, but the week before. And going in at this point, I had expected the Bills to be sitting at, I want to say 5-2, going into the bye, or you know what, it might have actually been. No, I think I had them sitting at like 6-2 after their 2 sets of 4 games, because I usually like to break it up like 4, 4, 4, and 5, since there's what, or 4, 4, yeah, 4, 4, 4, and 5. Since there's 17 games in a season, usually trying to go game by game, but I had predicted they would be 6-2 through the first 8 games of the season. So currently they're sitting at 6-1, and I guess in order for that to be spot on, they would have to lose this Sunday to the Jets. Which, I mean, in fairness to the Jets, they're one of the surprise teams of the league, but something that is probably not a surprise to most people, not really a surprise completely to me, but the Bills, through basically the midpoint of their season, have been fantastic. To me, they are hands down the best team in football. They have played as tough of a schedule as anybody in football. You can say what you want about, the other teams that have the same record as them, or, the lone undefeated team at this point. Shout out to the Philadelphia Eagles. But the Bills have, lived up to expectations in a general sense, for sure. But I think the biggest thing that stuck out to me, and what has me so excited, not only about the regular season, but just in the future, is you look back at the last 2 years, the Bills have kind of established themselves as one of, if not the most dominant teams, not only in the AFC but just in the entire NFL. They have had their struggles with a few things. One of them being games against legitimate playoff contending teams, as well as finding consistency with running the ball, and most importantly, close games. Last year, they were either blowing out their opponents or they were losing in very close fashion. I want to say they won almost all their games by at least like 10 points. I think there was one or two games that I can think of that were actually close. And as nice as that is to have a decisive victory, most games are going to come down to like an 8 to 10 point swing, right? A lot of them are going to be less than 7 points. Something I think about a lot, the Jacksonville Jaguars, right? This season they're 2-6. They have not lost a game by more than 8 points, which is kind of amazing. So they're 2-6 overall, and 2-6 in one-score games, right? The Bills this season, they have had some very impressive wins over, defending Super Bowl champs and the Tennessee Titans, who are currently sitting at 5-2, right? But on top of those decisive wins, which they've shown to do quite frequently the past couple of years. I mean, they blew out a number of teams last year, but of course they would lose these close games. This year, they're blowing out teams 38-3 to Pittsburgh, 41-7 to Tennessee, 31-10 to LA. Opening game of the season. Say what you want about those teams, but 23-20 win against Baltimore, 24-20 wins against Kansas City. I mean, those are such huge milestones for this team. I get it. The Bills have been able to beat the Chiefs in the regular season in the past. They did so last year. But again, it was a decisive blowout win where they won last year. This year, come from behind, game-winning touchdown scored inside 2 minutes again. Unlike last year where the defense couldn't hold up, where Josh Allen, the last time he took the field, they had the lead. The defense was able to step up and stop Patrick Mahomes. And so you had that great victory. And then the Baltimore Ravens game, another good team, another quality team, winning by one score. They actually came back. And that was something that was a little different to me. It's last year, as great as the Bills were, I mean, they were 11-6, and it seemed to be, like I said, if they weren't blowing you out, they were probably going to lose in a close game. If they fell behind, Machiavelli, when it rains, it pours. I do like the way that Josh Allen dances. I like the way that he moves, and I like the way that he rocks, and I like the way that he woos. But last year, I mean, that Colts game, for example, I mean, they went down like 14-3, 21-3, and then the final score is 41-15, right? They went down 14-3, 20-3 against Baltimore, and I legitimately was thinking to myself, all right, it's a rainy game, shitty conditions, it's not looking good. The Ravens can run the ball. This game's probably gonna finish, I don't know, 20-3 at like halftime. I think it's probably going to be like 34-10, 34-14, something like that, or 34-17. No, the Bills come back 23-20, and it was amazing, right? It was fantastic, and it was a great game, and that's what I love to see, right? The Bills, they're sitting at 6-1, and not only have they beat good teams, but they've beaten good teams in one-score games. Two things they could not do last year, two things I was scared about this year. They've had a little bit of everything. The one thing that sticks out, they are, like I said, 6-1. They did lose to the Miami Dolphins. That's right. In a 21-19 game, in what was a very bizarre game, it gave me the taste of the Patriots game from last year on Monday night. It really did. Josh Allen threw for 400 yards. I think he rushed for 50 more yards. Like, he was statistically putting up big numbers, but time after time, for whatever reason, they just could not come up. And it was very much like kind of how they played last year in one-score games. And they just let it slip away. Miami, from the skin of their teeth, they just made it out in what was a very bizarre game. Very bizarre game. You saw, Josh Allen failing to convert on 4th down in the red zone, I think on 2 occasions. He short-armed to a wide-open Isaiah McKenzie on what was 10 yards through the air. Just the weirdest play you'll ever see in your life from Josh Allen. Tua-esque, right? But shout out to the Dolphins in that game. They did win, and it was in Miami, week 3, hot as hell. I think the temperatures were in the triple digits on the field. You got that home field advantage if you're Miami, having the other team facing the sun, which I think is hilarious. I mean, it's always been like that, so it is what it is. And to me, it was very much in the same ilk as the Patriots Monday night game last year. Tua and the Dolphins in general didn't really do much on their end. They just kind of let the Bills, I don't want to say self-destruct, but they just kind of let the Bills twiddle their thumbs and kind of try their best and kind of ran around in circles. Because, the Bills had 450 yards of offense. The Dolphins had 200 yards of offense. The Dolphins were 3 of 3 in the red zone. The Bills were 1 of 3 in the red zone. That's ultimately what lost them the game. But yeah, they sit at 6-1. They're first in the AFC conference, which I think is the biggest kind of point of emphasis and the biggest upside. They have an entire game lead on the conference, as well as tiebreakers over both teams that are on their tail, the Titans and the Chiefs. Shout out to the Titans for as ugly as they've been, for as quite literally not great as they've looked. Easy schedule or not, they are 5-2. And, you know, just like last year, of all the teams in the AFC, the Bills, the Chiefs, the Bengals, it was the Titans who managed to get the 1 seed. Will they get the 1 seed this year? Fuck, I hope not. I mean, anything is possible. But I mean, they benched Ryan Tannehill and they're still 5-2. Like, that is, you gotta. I mean, at that point, you really have to tip your cap to good old Mike Vrabel, because they are as unintimidating, in my opinion, as it gets. Shout out to Derrick Henry, he's really come alive. But for a while there, he wasn't really doing anything, but they were still winning games. Granted, easy ass schedule. I mean, you know, they're beating up on the football team, they're beating up on the Jags, the Texans, what. But I mean, they still won their games. So kudos to them. But yeah, kind of looking at the statistics this year, Josh Allen's thrown for 2,200 yards in 8 games. That's absolutely fantastic. 7 games technically, right? 7-1. So he's averaging over 300 yards in the air, like 315 yards a game. He's thrown for 19 touchdowns. He's only been sacked 11 times. So in my opinion, he is, I don't want to say he's running away with the MVP, but to me, I would say it's between he and Mahomes, and I would say he is just a tier above Mahomes for the MVP, mainly because he beat Mahomes head to head, and in my opinion, he had a better game than Mahomes when they played each other. You know, he's had some games where he got benched in the fourth quarter because they were absolutely demolishing the Titans and the Steelers. And, you know, where Mahomes is, I believe, sitting at like 20 touchdowns as of this point. Josh Allen is also running the ball really well. He also has 2 rushing touchdowns. So Josh Allen's sitting at 22 overall touchdowns for the season. He has thrown 6 interceptions, which is, you know, I don't want to say it's kind of a lot, but, you know, through halfway through the season, 12 touchdowns and 16-17 game season. It's kind of a lot. It's kind of a lot. I mean, it is what it is. I think based on how he's performed through the air, I think it kind of cancels it out, in my opinion. I mean, he's completing like 66% of his passes, which is solid. It's not fantastic anymore. But I don't know. I still think he is playing as good of quarterback as anybody in the league, straight up. So he's having a fantastic season. He's also rushed for 300 yards, and he's been pretty consistent there. As far as rushing the ball for the rest of the team, hasn't looked great. They have been able to run the ball relatively well at times, but Devin Singletary averaging 4.5 yards a carry, no touchdowns for Devin Singletary, but he has had some good games. I think the Bills only have like 2 rushing touchdowns or 3 rushing touchdowns all season long, which is kind of wild. But yeah, I mean, Devin Singletary is as solid as he's been kind of his whole career, not getting a ton of touches. But when he is, in my opinion, he's doing well, and he's making the most of what he can, you know, with those touches. And so I definitely fuck with Devin, as always, as I always have. And James Cook, the rookie, who, you know, his first carry of his career, he fumbled the ball, so he was already behind the 8 ball. And, you know, for that reason, he hasn't gotten a ton of playing time. I'd say he's probably getting a quarter of the snaps at this point. What I've seen from him, I do like his burst. I think he's much, much faster out of the gun than Devin Singletary. And I have liked what I've seen as a pass catcher, and I think as the season goes along, we're going to see him utilized even more. He's had a couple pretty good games here and there. I want to say last week against the Packers, he had a decent bit of action. But even then, he's only scored 1 touchdown all season long, which is kind of wild. But the Bills also did just trade good old Zachy Mossy, in my opinion, and somebody who, I've said it and I've heard a lot of other people say it, is I'm pretty much done with Zach Moss. He was kind of useless, respectfully. He is not bad at anything, but he's not good at anything either, which is not a place you want to be as a running back in the NFL. I'm sorry, you can't just be somebody who is a 6 out of 10 or maybe a 7 out of 10 in every component, and maybe you're 7 or 8 out of 10 as a pass blocker. Like, that's just not gonna work. But they're able to package him off, and like I think a conditional 5th or 6th round pick for Nyheim Hines. Wow, that is a hell of a pickup for a team that a lot of people were like, oh, you guys should, make all these trades and do all this and do all that and, be aggressive, blah, 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 blah. Why? There's no reason to. The Bills do not need to do that. There's no reason to try and do some Rams shit when your team is fantastic all around the board. You're getting Tre'Davious White back. I get it, your secondary. You lost Micah Hyde. You've lost some cornerback depth. You've had a fair amount of injuries, something I didn't really touch on. But at the end of the day, you have Josh Allen, and you have a good defense. You have a very mature team that doesn't make mistakes, that doesn't necessarily fold under pressure a lot. Miami game, like I said, kind of a mess, but they kind of got that ugly game out of their system. So there's no reason to. And I think the one trade they did make, they also brought back Dean Marlowe, which is cool. I fuck with that. The continuity. They got him for like a late 7th round pick next year. I mean, come on. It's basically just signing him as a free agent. I fuck with that heavy. I really love that approach. I think Nyheim Hines is going to be a great fit. People are saying you basically just traded for another James Cook. Maybe. But I think Nyheim Hines is very much similar to Isaiah McKenzie. I think he will be. But where Isaiah McKenzie is primarily a wide receiver who is, splitting in with the offense and the special teams, I think Nyheim Hines is going to be just like Isaiah McKenzie, except he's primarily a running back. And I think that that's something that the Bills are going to be greatly happy with and very appreciative of. And so really excited to see how he meshes within the running game. Though it hasn't been terrible, but it hasn't been great. But that hasn't caused any issues, in my opinion. It doesn't look pretty on the stat sheet. But I mean, at the end of the day, the Bills are still running for 5 yards a carry, and they have 860 yards rushing through 7 games. So it's not been terrible. Receiving wise, Stephon Diggs is basically back to his 2020 form. Last year he was pretty solid. He wasn't, first team all pro, but at the same time he still had like over 100 catches, like almost 1,300 yards in 17 games, which is pretty good. This year though, through 7 games, over 760 yards, averaging 110 yards a game. So I mean, technically he's on pace for almost 1,900 yards. Shout to Tyreek Hill, who at the time of this recording is on pace to break Calvin Johnson's single season record. Somehow Cooper Kupp didn't last year, but he's on pace for over 2,000 receiving yards, which is absolutely bananas. Shout out to Tyreek Hill. He's been doing that with Teddy Bridgewater and Skylar Thompson as his quarterback, as well as Tua. So say what you want about Tyreek, but I think he only has like 2 touchdowns, but he's got like an absurd amount of catches. Stephon Diggs, on the other hand, though, he's got 55 catches, 760 yards. He's been fantastic. 7 touchdowns as well. Yeah, I mean, he's amazing. He's been fan-fucking-tastic. Gabriel Davis, more of the same. I kind of... this dude has 16 catches in 6 games. Think of that. Gabriel Davis does. For 418 yards. He's averaging 26 yards a catch. He has 4 touchdowns. He's been as boom or bust as he's always been. Hence the reason I didn't really touch him in fantasy. Although I do think he's poised for a big game against the Jets. I'm going to be honest. But he had a couple games like against the Steelers where he had like 3 catches for 190 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like some ridiculous shit. But he has been more or less what I've expected. Maybe not, the number one receiver that other people think, he'd be a number one receiver on other teams. I don't know about that. But he is a fantastic deep threat that I fuck with heavy. Devin Singletary is your third leading receiver, so there you go there. But shout out to Isaiah McKenzie as well. He's been a nice little addition. I love Isaiah McKenzie. I still was like, whenever he originally came onto the Bills team, when I think the Bills signed him off of the Broncos practice squad like 4 years ago, I was like, yes. Dawson Knox, who, he's been not great, but, he's caught himself some big balls here. He's made some nice plays. But I think the biggest standout, two big standouts really. Jamison Crowder has really been a non-factor. It is what it is. But good old Khalil Shakir, I like what I see out of him. And that's what I'm talking about, is the Bills do not need to make a trade. All right, you can say what you want, but I feel like if they took away Stephon Diggs, you would have guys like Crowder, you would have guys like Shakir, McKenzie. They would step up, and I still feel like the Bills could be productive with or without him. I mean, it is what it is. Obviously, Stephon Diggs is blowing up the stat sheet and kind of taking it away from the rest of the team, respectively. But I'm fucking with him, bro. I really am. I think, I think I like what I see from Shakir, and I like what I see from Stephon. Those have probably been my two favorite players on offense, despite Shakir, getting limited action. I'm really excited for him kind of moving down the stretch. And flipping over to the defensive side of the ball, you've seen some pretty big production from two impact players, right? Von Miller and Greg Rousseau, right? Two guys, two pass rushers, each of them 5 or more sacks. Von Miller, who only has like 14 tackles on the season, who is only playing, he's basically only on the field when they're going to pass. He's probably, if you're, on each set of downs, he's probably only on 3 out of 4 snaps. So he's not playing 100% of the snaps, which is fine. But he still has 6 sacks. He's made several exceptional tackles. One that comes to mind is he tripped up Patrick Mahomes on like a big third down against the Chiefs that, in my opinion, really swayed the game big time. Greg Rousseau, though, has been fantastic as well. He's gotten in there. I have liked what I've seen from Jordan Phillips, too. And just in general, the Bills have kind of had a cavalcade of random defensive players. Shaq Lawson's gotten in there, Boogie Basham, Settle, who have just kind of came in and just performed in ways you wouldn't have really expected. Shout out to the defensive backs. I thought Khair Elam, he's got a couple interceptions. I thought he's played well. All things considered, I know he had kind of a rough go of it early on. But in the absence of Tre'Davious White, I feel like the Bills secondary, despite missing not only him, but also Micah Hyde, who made me so sad to see him go. I absolutely love Micah Hyde, one of my all-time favorite Bills. Even though he started his career with the Packers, he, in my opinion, has been like the epitome of the changing guard of the entire franchise. Love Micah, love Jordan Poyer. Both of them, 2 of the most underrated defensive players in the NFL, defensive backs. Jordan Poyer has been as fantastic as he's ever been. He's missed a couple games. He still has like 4 interceptions. Matt Milano has been as fantastic as he's ever been. Again, an incredibly underrated player. I fucking love Matt Milano. He's one of my favorite players. One of my favorite draft picks the Bills have had later in rounds of all time. Again, Teron Johnson has been solid. He's made some big plays. Dane Jackson as well. Just overall, the defense has been great. You think of guys like Von Miller, kind of, we'll say, I don't want to say taking all the credit, but those are the players you instantly think of. But guys like Matt Milano, guys like Jordan Poyer, who time in and time out are underrated and are going to give you quality defensive play at their respective positions. They've been playing well. Tremaine Edmonds, it's been a bit of a wash, but to me, I love Tremaine Edmonds purely based on just his tangibles alone, you can say what you want. He's 6'5", and he can run like a motherfucker, and for that reason, he'll always have value to me. I don't care what anybody says. I know he's not the greatest, not the most refined, but he's still like 24 years old. He's still insanely young. And so, yeah, I've really liked what I've seen from the defensive side of the ball. I would say if I had to pick kind of, we're getting Tre'Davious White back as well, which is going to be great. If I had to kind of pick at this point in the season, take a step back, pick my surprise offensive player of the year, my surprised defensive player of the year, my favorite game of the year, my least favorite game of the year, and my bold prediction for the rest of the year. I'll start with my surprise player of the year on each side of the ball. I'm going to start on offense, actually, and I'm going to go with Khalil Shakir, because frankly, if you look at the stat sheet, really it's Diggs and Allen who are the only ones who are having like really good statistical seasons. But I have liked what I've seen from Shakir quite a bit. I'm very excited for him. I think he will get more of a role throughout this season and throughout the coming seasons. Surprise player on a defensive side of the ball, I think I'm going to go with Damar Hamlin, because at times he's looked not great, but he's stepped in, and I didn't even know who the fuck he was. But, he's a 6th-round pick from last year, and he's filled in for Micah Hyde pretty goddamn well. And I've liked what I've seen from him, and he's one of the reasons why the Bills defense is still ranked in the top 5, despite having Micah Hyde go down, despite not having Tre'Davious White. I mean, that's amazing. So those are my two surprise players on each side of the ball. My favorite game of the season, as much as I want to say the Chiefs game, as great as that game was and as significant as that game was, I think I'm going to go with the Titans game, just because I feel like that was a game where the Bills offense and defense respectively played as complete of a game as you could have ever wanted. Bills made like no mistakes, and they finally beat a team that they've struggled to beat for years for whatever reason, despite, in my opinion, having the better team. The last 2 years had been, not been able to beat on Monday night, and they finally got the monkey off their back, and it was satisfying as hell. And now you come to see that the Titans are actually a good team. Say what you want about the defending champs, because they're like 3-5 right now, but the Titans are as good of a team as they were last year, it seems like, record-wise. So that's my slight favorite game of the year, just edging out over the Chiefs game. Least favorite game of the year is an easy one. Obviously, it's the Dolphins game. That game was a fucking mess. Players were getting hurt. Players were getting dehydrated. It was as frustrating of a game as I've seen since the Bills became a powerhouse. I mean, it's up there with the Jags game. Obviously, the Jags game is the worst game of all time because it was such a horrible team. But, the fact that the Dolphins, did not deserve to win that game based on the time of possession, based on how they got, outgained and this, that, and the third, and just, it was a mess. It was an absolute nightmare of a game. The worst possible game, honestly, I feel like the Bills could have had. I think the only silver lining is, luckily at this point, it hasn't come back to bite the Bills in the ass. They still are a game and a half up on the Dolphins, and they still get them later on in the season. But that game was painful to watch. Oh, God, that was frustrating. And I think my bold prediction for the rest of the season for the Bills, looking at their schedule, my bold prediction is the Bills will only lose one more game the rest of the season. The Bills are going to go 15-2. That's my bold prediction. I never would have thought that, just because the NFL is crazy. Teams lose to inferior teams all the fucking time. But the Bills are going to go 15-2. That's my bold prediction. Looking at their schedule, they've got, obviously they've already had their bye, but they've got at the Jets, who are 5-3. I get it, but I don't believe in them. Their quarterback is absolutely atrocious. Zach Wilson is as bad of a quarterback as there is at this point in the season. The fact that they're 5-3 is just wow, literally. But then you've got home to Minnesota, home to Cleveland without Deshaun Watson, at Detroit on Thanksgiving. Your next 4 games, all incredibly winnable in my opinion. You know, Kirk Cousins in the cold. I get it. The Vikings have quietly been, you know, a solid-ass team, and I respect them. They've got some good victories under their belt, but I'm going to take Josh Allen to beat Kirk Cousins every fucking day of the week. I don't give a shit. Then, you know, you've got 3 divisional games back-to-back-to-back at New England, home to the Jets, home to Miami. I just, you know, the Bills are going to lose a game in here somewhere. Maybe they lose to Kirk Cousins and the Vikings. But I don't believe the Bills are favored in every game they have easily. The Bills are probably double-digit favorites in most of their games the rest of the season. You know, because you look at home to Cleveland, they're going to be favored by double digits. You know, at Detroit, they're going to be favored by double digits. At New England, I don't know if they'll be favored by double digits, but they'll be favored by a lot, right? Home to the Jets, home to Miami, at Chicago, double digit favorites. Like, I see 15-2. I do. I really do. They're going to lose a game in here somewhere. Will it? Hopefully it's not as ugly as the Dolphins game. I hope it's not as ugly. That Dolphins game was so frustrating. But the game I'm looking forward to the most, obviously, at Cincinnati. Maybe that's the game they lose. I hope not. I'll be in attendance. I hope they don't lose that game, because I'll be at that game. So, but yeah, I mean, halfway through the season, the Bills are fantastic. They are 6-1. The offense is tops in the league. Josh Allen's MVP candidate. And then to go along with that, you have a top 5 defense in the NFL. Last year, you could say what you want about who they were playing, the terrible quarterbacks they were playing. But this year, they've played Stafford, they've played Lamar, they've played Mahomes, they've played Rodgers, and they're still like a top 2-3 unit in the league. I don't know how you could possibly play better quarterbacks. Battle tested. And I'm telling you, you look up and down the schedule, it's got to be an upset. They are going to be decisive favorites every game the rest of the season. And for that reason, I think they're going to go 15-2. I'm excited. I can't fucking wait to listen back to this after they play the Patriots to finish the regular season. It's going to be good. It's going to be great.